Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says lasting peace is achievable this year. This comes after he and US President Donald Trump have a positive phone call. We are on the right track, Trump added on his social media network Truth Social. Israel says it has launched a limited ground operation to retake part of a key corridor in Gaza. The move appears to deepen an new Israeli offensive that shattered a ceasefire with Hamas that had begun in January. US President Donald Trump threatens Yemeni group the Houthis with complete annihilation and warns Iran to halt large levels of supplies. The remarks come after the group claimed to have launched a fresh strike on US naval vessels in the Red Sea. Protests erupt in Turkey after authorities detain the mayor of Istanbul and a key Erdogan rival just days before he was due to be elected as a presidential candidate. Prosecutors accuse him of corruption and aiding a terrorist group. US President Donald Trump will sign a long-anticipated executive order that aims to shut down the Department of Education. However, this will need to be confirmed in the Senate with the vote of some Democratic senators to shut down the agency. In Nigeria, 10 people are killed in a fiery highway pileup. The accident involved a truck carrying natural gas, which resulted in an explosion. Protests erupt in Buenos Aires as Argentina's Congress approves Javier Milei's new IMF loan. The protests are larger than last week's, which left 45 people injured. In the country's capital, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced that his country will receive over 300 migrants from Mexico. This decision comes amid a crisis that has seen the United States send deported migrants to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. Now starting, US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have expressed renewed optimism for peace following a positive hour-long phone call. Zelensky stated that lasting peace can be achieved this year under Trump's leadership. The conversation marks a shift from last month's tense White House meeting, signaling progress towards diplomatic alignment. The two leaders discussed the possible US ownership of the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia power plant, along with new US commitments to help Ukraine secure additional air defense systems from Europe. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that defense staff from both nations will closely coordinate efforts as battlefield situations evolve. While Trump praised the call as very good on Truth Social, Putin remains resilient to a full ceasefire, insisting that military assistance to Ukraine must stop. Zelensky, however, remains open to a partial ceasefire, particularly halting strikes on energy and transport infrastructure. Nonetheless, he warned that Ukraine would retaliate if Russia violated any ceasefire terms. Here's what the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say in the press conference.
First, I'd like to reiterate what the president said earlier following his call with President Zelensky this morning. He said he just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelensky. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We are very much on track. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who had gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted. And President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work.
Zelensky described the call as positive, frank and substantive, expressing hope that with Trump's leadership, peace could finally be within reach. Technical teams from the US and Ukraine are set to meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to further align strategies. President Zelensky later released a video talking about his discussions with President Trump. Here's what he said.
А сьогодні ніякого тиску я не відчував з боку президента Трампа, його не було. І це факт. Далі, ви знаєте, що я людина відкрита. Якщо б це було, я б сказав би відверто. Президент запитав: а якщо буде розуміння, що Америка може це відновити? Я йому сказав так, якщо можна модернізувати, вкладати гроші тощо. Ми готові це обговорювати з вами. Але ми говорили виключно про одну станцію, яка знаходиться під тимчасовою окупацією Росії.
Donald Trump told Zelensky on Wednesday that the United States could own and run Ukraine's nuclear power plants as part of his latest bid to secure a ceasefire in Russia's invasion of its neighbour. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has confirmed the possibility of the United States taking ownership of Ukrainian power plants. Let's take a look at what she said.
Also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
Zelensky also said he had discussed Trump's power plant takeover plan. He stated that they only talked about one power plant, which is under Russian occupation, referring to the plant in Zaporizhzhia. Here's what he had to say about it.
Президент запитав: а якщо буде розуміння, що Америка може це відновити? Я йому сказав так, якщо можна модернізувати, вкладати гроші тощо. Ми готові це обговорювати з вами. Але ми говорили виключно про одну станцію, яка знаходиться під тимчасовою окупацією Росії.
Moving on to the Middle East now, where Israel is investigating the death of a Bulgarian United Nations worker in the Gaza Strip after a UN agency reported the employee was killed in an explosion. The Israeli military denies any involvement. In a statement on X, Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson Memora Steen said the circumstances of the incident are being investigated. We emphasise that the initial examination found no connection to IDF activity whatsoever. The UN, however, has called for a thorough investigation and a transparent one into the incident. Efforts are ongoing to gather more information from witnesses and local sources. The international community continues to monitor the situation closely. This is what the United Nations have stated.
In my opinion, this was not an accident. It cannot be categorized as an accident. It is at least an incident. What is happening in Gaza is unconscionable. I'm shocked and devastated by this tragedy. What we do know is that an explosive ordnance was dropped or fired at infrastructure and detonated inside the building.
Meanwhile, tensions escalate as Israel launches targeted ground operations in Gaza following renewed airstrikes that broke a fragile 2-month ceasefire with Hamas. Israeli forces advance into central and southern Gaza, expanding control in the Netzarim corridor to enhance security. Israel blames Hamas for rejecting repeated offers to release hostages, while Hamas accuses Prime Minister Netanyahu of breaking the truce and endangering hostages. Hamas condemned Israel's action as a dangerous breach, but it says it remains committed to the ceasefire. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned Gazans to release hostages and remove Hamas, saying the alternative is total destruction and devastation. This is what he said.
קבלו את עצת נשיא ארצות הברית, תחזירו את החטופים ותסלקו את החמאס ויפתחו לכם אופציות אחרות, כולל יציאה למקומות אחרים בעולם למי שירצה. האלטרנטיבה היא הרס וחורבן.
Moving on now, where protests have erupted across Turkey after the detention of Istanbul's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, a leading opposition figure and potential presidential candidate. İmamoğlu from the secular Republican People's Party was arrested on corruption and terrorism charges, which he and his supporters deny. Police detained 100 people, including politicians, journalists and businessmen, as authorities imposed 4 days of restrictions in Istanbul. Despite the crackdown, thousands of protesters gathered, chanting anti-government slogans and clashing with police, who used pepper spray to disperse crowds. Imamoglu vowed to stand resolute for democracy, calling the charges part of a conspiracy against him. His party condemned the arrest as a coup against our next president, raising concerns over Turkey's shift towards autocracy. President Erdogan's government denies political motives, insisting Turkey's judiciary is independent. But European Union remains tense. This is what the EU Commission President had to say.
Thank you.
So we think that the arrest of the mayor is deeply concerning. As a Council of Europe member that Turkey is and an EU candidate country, Turkey must uphold the democratic values, especially the rights of elected officials.
Moving over to the US now, according to multiple reports, President Donald Trump is set to sign an executive order on Thursday to shut down the Department of Education, fulfilling a key campaign promise. The move faces immediate legal challenges. Democratic state attorneys general have filed a lawsuit to block the order and prevent the layoffs of nearly half of the department's staff, announced last week. Trump's efforts to dismantle a cabinet-level agency marks a significant escalation in his attempts to reduce government following efforts to cut other programs, like the US Agency for International Development, often without congressional approval. This is what Trump had stated earlier about his plans regarding the education department.
We're ranked at the bottom of the list, and yet we spend more. We're ranked number one for cost per student. We're ranked at the bottom of the list in education. And I know if I bring it back to Iowa, Indiana, Idaho, all these great states, I think I could say 40 states, I want to bring it back.
News from Africa now, where a deadly pileup in Nigeria has claimed at least 10 lives after a truck carrying natural gas exploded on Wednesday. The crash occurred near Nyana, just outside the capital Abuja, with rescue efforts hampered by severe traffic congestion and the highway shut down in both directions. The National Emergency Management Agency confirmed the ongoing rescue operation, though the exact death toll remains uncertain. An AFP journalist at the scene reported seeing at least 10 bodies amid the wreckage. Fuel truck accidents are tragically common in Nigeria, prompting recent government reforms aimed at improving safety for vehicles transporting liquid petrol. Authorities continue to manage the rescue efforts and investigate the cause of this devastating crash. This is the update by the Director of Search and Rescue, National Emergency Management Agency.
At about the time the Muslims were about breaking their fast, to about 6 o'clock or thereabout, or after 6. So we are informed that a trailer, a cement trailer, failed brake right from, it was on its way from the city center heading towards Nyanya area. So it failed brake and it continued coming all the way down along the way until it started hitting some vehicles.
Over to South America now, where Argentina's Congress has granted President Javier Milei the green light to negotiate a new loan agreement with the International Monetary Fund. The lower house approved the decree with 129 votes in favour, 108 against, and 6 abstentions, allowing the government to move forward without Senate debate. The proposed loan, estimated between $10 billion and $20 billion, aims to bolster the central bank's foreign currency reserves and ease capital controls as Argentina continues to address its existing $44 billion debt with the IMF. Financial markets have reacted positively, with the Buenos Aires Stock Exchange S&P Merval index rising by 4.52% and sovereign debt seeing a slight increase of 0.4%. However, the approval has sparked widespread protests in Buenos Aires and other major cities. Demonstrators, including social organizations and opposition supporters, accuse the government of bypassing transparency and rushing the decree without sufficient legislative debate. Clashes between protesters and law enforcement have been reported, with calls for more public input before finalizing the loan deal. Critics argue that the loan could further burden the country's already struggling economy, while supporters insist it is necessary to stabilize the financial system. The government maintains that securing the loan is essential for economic recovery, despite public outcry. As negotiations with the IMF progress, President Milei faces mounting pressure to address public concerns while pushing for economic stability. The international community is watching closely as Argentina navigates these turbulent financial waters. Staying in the continent now, President Nicolas Maduro has announced that Venezuela will receive a flight carrying 306 repatriated migrants from Mexico on Thursday. This comes after the crisis over the United States' decision to send Venezuelans to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. The aircraft is expected to land at around 10 a.m. local time. The Donald Trump administration transferred 238 Venezuelans to El Salvador over the weekend, accusing them of belonging to a criminal gang. It invoked a 1798 law that allows for the expulsion of enemy aliens without trial. Reportedly, Maduro ordered his chief negotiator, Parliament Speaker George Rodriguez, to take every action to guarantee the return of flights from the United States for all migrants who have been detained in that country, to give them respect, dignity and support. Let's take a look at what he said.
He ordenado incrementar todas las acciones diplomáticas para traernos a todos los venezolanos y venezolanas de los Estados Unidos. Mañana a las 10 de la mañana ya coordiné, compañero Diosdado Cabello está haciendo las coordinaciones operativas y llegan 306 migrantes que vienen vía Aeropuerto de México.
Over to Europe now, where leaders are set to gather in Brussels for the European People's Party Summit on Thursday, ahead of the European Council meeting on March the 20th to the 21st. The summit will bring together EU heads of state and government, opposition and party leaders from the EPP, along with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Parliament President Roberta Metsola. The meeting, hosted by EPP President Manfred Weber, will focus on preparations for the upcoming European Council. The summit is expected to shape key EU policies and strategies as Europe faces significant political and economic challenges. Ahead of the summit, French far-right leader Marine Le Pen, French National Rally President Jordan Bardella, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban held a pre-summit meeting in Brussels. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
Je ne peux que me réjouir lorsque des dirigeants se mettent autour d'une table pour parler de la paix. Surtout quand le président français, lui, ne cesse de parler de la guerre. Voilà. Donc j'espère que ceux qui parlent de la paix arriveront à conclure avant.
Not there yet at this moment. What we have done now, we changed the constitution saying that the basic rights of the kids to have the proper growing up and education is the most important value, which is well ahead of all the other basic rights of the citizens of Hungary. So that's what we have done, which could be a basis to ban anything which is against the interest of the children. So what we are doing is to protect our children. This is the target.
Fighting escalates in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo as Rwanda-backed M23 rebels press deeper into Congolese territory, despite calls for an immediate ceasefire. On Wednesday, rebels entered the outskirts of Walikale after overrunning an army position in a surprise attack, sparking clashes with Congolese forces and pro-government militias. The offensive comes a day after Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda President Paul Kagame held surprise talks in Doha, Qatar, where both leaders expressed support for an immediate ceasefire. Details on the ceasefire terms remain unclear, and peace talks scheduled in Angola did not take place. Mexico is grappling with outrage after the discovery of a mass grave in Jalisco state, where charred bones, shoes and clothing were found at a suspected drug cartel training site. The site, uncovered earlier this month in the town of Chichilatan, has raised serious concerns about cartel violence and government accountability. In response to national outrage, President Claudia Sheinbaum announced measures to strengthen the national search Commission and pledged to introduce reforms to improve missing persons identification and transparency. Mexico's Attorney General Alejandro Gertz vows to uncover the truth, criticizing flaws in the initial investigation by Jalisco State Prosecutor's Office, including a failure to thoroughly search the site. Let's listen.
6 meses después, los servicios periciales del Estado de Jalisco aún no cuentan con un dictamen definitivo en el que se establezca con precisión la antigüedad y la identidad de los restos encontrados.
The Vatican has announced that Pope Francis's health is showing signs of improvement after more than a month in hospital. The 88-year-old pontiff, who has been treated for pneumonia in both lungs at Rome's Gemelli Hospital since February the 14th, has suspended the use of an oxygen mask and as his condition stabilizes. According to a Vatican medical bulletin, Pope Francis has suspended non-invasive mechanical ventilation and also reduced the need for high-flow oxygen therapy. The bulletin also noted progress in his motor respiratory physiotherapy. However, the Vatican cautioned that the suspension of the oxygen mask does not rule out its future use, and a hospital discharge for Pope Francis is not imminent. The Vatican continues to closely monitor the Pope's recovery and will keep you updated on any developments. In a historic announcement, the Tour de France is set to commence in Edinburgh, Scotland for its 114th edition in 2027. This marks the first time the prestigious cycling race will start in Scotland. The Grand Depart will feature 3 stages traversing Scotland, England and Wales, showcasing the diverse landscapes of the United Kingdom. Notably, both the men's and women's races, including the Tour de France Femmes, will begin in the same country outside of France for the first time. Scotland's First Minister, John Sweeney, expressed immense pride in hosting the event, highlighting it as a fantastic opportunity to showcase Scotland globally. Tour de France director Christian Prudhomme emphasised the strong historical ties between the UK and the Tour, anticipating an exceptional event spanning England, Scotland and Wales. The last UK Grand Depart in 2014 in Yorkshire during massive crowds and significant economic benefits. The 2027 event is expected to provide similar advantages, inspiring a new generation of cyclists in Scotland and beyond. The EU bloc's industry chief has announced on Wednesday that the EU will reduce steel imports by a further 15% from April to prevent a new wave of cheap steel flooding the market. European steel producers reportedly battling high energy prices and competition from Asia and elsewhere have warned that the EU risks becoming a dumping ground for cheap steel, which could kill off Europe's plants as Washington tariffs withdraw trade flows. European Commission Vice President Stefan Sejourne, who is tasked with defining the bloc's industrial strategy, said a first measure would be to tighten import quotas known as safeguards for multiple steel grades from April the 1st, which would cut inflows by approximately 15%. Let's take a look at what the EU Commissioner said.
Le 1er avril, nous renforcerons la clause de sauvegarde actuelle. Nous visons une baisse allant jusqu'à 15% des importations. Je reviendrai s'il y a besoin sur le mécanisme de modification de cette clause de sauvegarde que nous allons rigidifier dans ses principes et son application.
A jury in North Dakota has ordered environmental advocacy group Greenpeace to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in damages in a lawsuit brought by a US pipeline operator. The group was accused by Energy Transfer of orchestrating a campaign of violence and defamation during the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline nearly a decade ago. ET, which denies any intent to stifle speech, was awarded more than $660 million in damages across 3 Greenpeace entities, citing charges including trespass, nuance, conspiracy and deprivation of property access. ET thanked the jury and stated that the win was for the people of Mandan and North Dakota, who had to live through the daily harassment and disruptions caused by the protesters who were funded and trained by Greenpeace. Reportedly, Greenpeace USA's interim executive director, Shushma Rahman, has told the group that the plans to appeal the verdict. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
The people who power organizations like Greenpeace, you can't bankrupt them. They are there, they are fully in support, and the work will continue. Well, the reality is that you might think of Greenpeace as an organization or a set of organizations, and we are more than that. We are people-powered. We do not accept corporate or government funding. We are entirely supported by individuals who give small amounts.
President Donald Trump urged the US Federal Reserve on Wednesday to cut interest rates to help offset effects of his tariffs, renewing his vocal disagreement with the central bank's decision-making. Trump demanded in a post on his Truth Social site to do the right thing hours after the FED decided to hold rates steady while reducing its growth forecast and hiking its inflation outlook. The Federal Reserve has penciled in 2 rate cuts this year, but Chairman Jerome Powell noted that uncertainty today is unusually elevated and that inflation is ticking up. Let's take a look at what US Federal Reserve Chair said.
Ahead, the new administration is in the process of implementing significant policy changes in 4 distinct areas: trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. It is the net effect of these policy changes that will matter for the economy and for the path of monetary policy. While there have been recent developments in some of these areas, especially trade policy, uncertainty around the changes and their effects on the economic outlook is.
Reportedly, experts have warned that the tariffs, which are being met with trade retaliation by some countries, threaten to possibly tip the US economy and others into a recession. Trump has admitted that the economy may suffer a little disturbance as his planned levies take hold, but that America is otherwise on the cusp of a golden age. In a significant escalation, US President Donald Trump has issued a stern warning to Yemen's Houthi rebels, stating that they will be completely annihilated if their attacks persist. This declaration follows a series of American airstrikes targeting Houthi-controlled regions, including the capital Sana'a and the stronghold of Sada. The initial strikes over the weekend resulted in at least 53 fatalities, among them children, and numerous injuries. President Trump also directed his warnings towards Iran, the primary supporter of the Houthis, urging Tehran to cease its military support. He claimed, without providing specific evidence, that Iran has reduced its military aid to the Houthis, but insisted that all assistance must stop immediately. The conflict has severely impacted Yemen's humanitarian situation. The United Nations suspended operations in the Houthi stronghold of Sada due to security concerns following the detention of dozens of UN workers. Additionally, the World Food Programme reported unauthorized seizures of food aid by the Houthis, exacerbating the plight of civilians in the region. The international community continues to monitor these developments closely as the potential for further escalation remains high. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.